The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with Auto Success Magazine. And I really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. We've got a great topic for you. I'm telling you, Eric, Glenn, Jim, David, Craig, you're all going to love this. Today we're going to talk about 6 ways to prevent smartphone shoppers in your showroom from surfing your competition. I'm sure this is a problem that you've all noticed in your stores. You know, you get up to go do some paperwork, get some keys, take some paperwork to finance, take the car back to get detailed. You know, there's all kinds of places in the sales process where you're very busy, but your customer's not. And today's guest, Kevin Butler, he's the automotive expert at Vertical Communications. He's going to share with us some techniques to help prevent your customers from shopping your competition while they're in your dealership. Couple of things I'd like to go over before we get started. First of all, if you all take a look at the right side of your screen, you should have a GoToWebinar panel that's open. Near the bottom should say questions with a plus mark next to it. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in there. And keep in mind, the 2 best questions today are going to go on vacation for free. So, you know, think of some good ones. And if you have any troubles with the webinar, you can also type into that questions, and it'll come directly to me. And I can try to help you while we're in the process of the webinar. But if you click on that plus, you type in the questions, and we will get to all the questions at the end of the presentation. Also, one thing I'd like to remind everybody, I'm sure you've probably all heard me say this a million times. If you haven't joined Auto Success Webinars yet on Facebook, please do. It's a Facebook group. You just go to the search bar on Facebook, type in Auto Success Webinars, and it'll come up. You request to join the group. We'll approve you. And from that point on, you'll have access to the speakers, future speakers, past speakers, myself, you know, the staff at Auto Success. It's a great place for you to recommend topics you'd like for us to have on future webinars. It's also a great place for you to interact with speakers and then other people that come to these webinars as well. You know, you're all going to learn some new things today, and you know, a lot of them might take weeks to implement. And as you go through that process, you can share your successes and failures with your peers and ask for advice and share advice. Kevin, if you'd like to, go ahead and get started.
Thanks a lot, Brian. I really appreciate it.
No
As
problem.
Brian said, my name's Kevin Butler. I'm VP over at Vertical Communications, focused entirely on the auto dealer market as we deliver communication solutions into that space. And today I'm going to spend some time, as Brian pointed out, talking about the problem of prospects in your showroom getting on their smartphone and looking at competitors' sites, looking at competitive offers. First, let's try and understand the problem a little bit. So the first thing to understand is exactly what I'm talking about and how bad it is. You've probably seen it out in your showroom, as Brian said, and here's what the numbers really tell us. That 63% of the prospects in your showroom are shopping on their smartphones right now. So that means in this little display we've seen right here that, you know, these guys and these guys, those guys over there, way in the back on the right, and even these guys are all probably on their smartphones at the minute looking at all sorts of other information. So how do you deal with this? You've lost their attention. Even though they're on your showroom floor, out on your lot, with your sales team, you don't really have their attention. Well, the first thing to understand is, what the heck are they doing? What are they looking at on their smartphones? Obviously, we know nowadays that everyone's spending time on their smartphones all day long. And one of those things to understand is that 57% of all Americans have a smartphone in their pocket at this point. That's everybody. That's from your 5-year-old to your 75-year-old grandfather. They all have smartphones, or at least almost 60% of them at this point. So what they're doing at the dealership is a number of things. According to Place Incorporated, who did a survey in 2014, 25% of them, in other words, 5 out of 20, let's just look at a group of 20, say, 5 out of 20 are doing competitive price comparisons. So they're looking at your competitors, they're seeing what they've got to offer right now. Just slightly less than that, a little less than 4 of them, are looking at trade-in pricing. They're already trying to figure out how much money am I going to get for my car. And even a slight less amount of that, still almost 4 people, are calculating payments. How much is this going to cost me? They're looking at online tools of that type. And about 17% are researching what's the best price they should be paying for this vehicle, what's the market say, things like Kelley Blue Book and that kind of thing. And about 2 of them are looking for special incentives, offers. They're looking for the better deal. They're looking for whatever, can they get a better deal than what you're offering them right now? And just slightly less than 2 of them are reading dealer reviews. They're on Dealer Rater. They're figuring out what people have to say about how good or bad you are. And then about 7% of them are researching financing. Okay, I know how much it's going to cost. How am I going to pay for this? About 2 of them are trying to get advice on how to shop right now, how to look at, getting the best deal, how to work with your sales team. And speaking of your sales team, just under 2 of them are fact-checking every single thing that your sales staff tells them, seeing if they're right or wrong, figuring out what they're having to say there. And almost 5 out of those 20 are checking competitor inventory, seeing, hey, do they have the car that I really want? You tell me that you've only got it in white and black. Do they have the blue model? Do they have the 6-cylinder edition? Do they have the one that I really want? So they're looking at competitor inventory. Now this obviously adds up to a lot more than 100% because several people are doing several of these things. But that gives you an idea of all the different things, all the inputs they're getting outside of your actual sales presentation. They're not necessarily listening to your sales staff's pitch. They're not looking at the car in front of them. They're finding out about everything else around them. So when do they do this? How do they get sucked into their smartphones instead of paying attention to the very fact, the reason they came on your lot, which is the cars you have, the sales staff you have, the information you have? Why in the world are they doing this instead? Well, there's a few different reasons. First and foremost, the salesperson leaves them alone. Brian mentioned a bunch of this. Hey, they go to get the keys for a test drive. They go check to see if the sales manager can talk to you. They go walk away to check on an answer. So anytime the salesperson leaves them alone, this isn't true just at a car dealership. This is everywhere. Out comes the smartphone, and they're often surfing somewhere else, and you've lost their attention. Or if the salesperson simply doesn't have the answer right now, if they're looking for information, the salesperson doesn't immediately have it, doesn't have every single answer ever created, then that person's often looking on their smartphone to find out the answer. And then if you're waiting for someone, say, hey, look, you brought the sales manager over to help close the deal because stats say that's going to improve your odds about 33% to closing the deal if you bring the sales manager in at the end of the deal. Maybe you're waiting for F&I to open up so you can go ahead and get the paperwork done. You're waiting for somebody else. Anytime you're waiting, that smartphone is going to come out. And simply, if they get a notification, if something pops up on their screen, they're probably going to pull it out and check it. We'll talk a little more about that one specifically in a moment. So what do you do about it? How do you deal with this? What does your sales guy do about this? First, it's clear you've got to stay engaged at all times. There's no ability anymore to walk away, to be distracted, to not be fully engaged with the customer at all times while they're on the lot. If you're not fully engaged with them, you're taking away your chance to be able to be involved with them. You're losing their attention. Second, and this sounds like an impossibility, but we'll talk about how to deal with this, your sales team has to have all the answers to all the questions they have, and they have to have it right now. And that's a really, really hard task. We'll spend some time talking about how to solve that one. But it's a very difficult task to have all the answers. Nobody's that good, but there's ways we can deal with it. Third, you need to minimize delays. You've got to make sure that there aren't those points where, oh, you're waiting for somebody, the person has just sat down and told to hold on a second, including that having all the answers, but you've got to minimize delays. It's a difficult proposition. And then you've got to reduce distractions. You've got to get rid of things that knock them out of the engaged sales flow with the salesperson. You can't have things going on that's going to cause all sorts of people to be distracted. So that brings us to 6 ways to accomplish that. Here's a way to keep those shoppers off their smartphones and engaged with your sales process. What we're going to be talking about is first, developing a concept we call reach-back. Second, making sure you have a review expert in-house. Third, perfecting your sales process. Fourth, eliminating interruptions. Fifth, protecting your backyard, and finally, measuring the effectiveness of all of this. Because if you can't measure it, you're never going to be able to know if you're successful. So let's get right into these. First, developing reach back. The customer's going to have a lot of questions. They will ask all sorts of things. In fact, their smartphone may be generating new questions for them as they talk with their friends, as they look on online forums. Everybody's doing research ahead of time, so they may come in armed with a list of questions. And your sales team got to stay engaged. They can't look through the answer. They can't go ask for somebody else. They can't step away for a moment because they're going to lose the customer nowadays. So how do they resolve that tension? They've got to stay engaged. They can't look for the answer. Well, I'm a former Army guy. So I went to look at how the Army deals with this because they have people out there in the field who can't be spending a bunch of time researching, can't be spending a bunch of time looking for answers. They have to stay completely focused. And the way they do it is they use this concept of reach back. One guy in the field, but they may have a whole huge team in the back who've got the time to do the research, to call in other assets, to go look at intelligence reports and get all that information and then feed it back to the guy in the field. So they get help from that extensive team. And this is the same idea that we push for being able to be successful out on the showroom floor, to keep engaged. Instead of having to go look for the answer, you very simply ask a quick question, use an instant messaging system to silently request a question, and then get help from the rest of the team. You can have the sales manager, you can have F&I, other members of the sales team who are pitching in to give you the answer you need. And you can get right back to that person and not get unengaged with them. Then when the answer comes back, hey, look, you've got the answer to their question. Hold on just a second. Let me find out. Put the information in. Come back talking to the person. And then when the answer comes to you, great, you've got them taken care of. So that's how you can resolve this problematic dichotomy, staying engaged, but finding all the answers and giving them all the answers at the same time. It's a pretty straightforward technology solution. You've just got to do a few things to make it work. And so in seeing this, we've seen a couple of key points that make this successful. The first is that the sales team has to trust they will get an answer. They're not going to use this system if they think, hey, I'm going to put in a question, but nobody's going to answer me. So you have to get a full team commitment from everybody in the dealership that they're going to help whenever one of these questions come in. But that's not enough to make sure that they get an answer. You've got to develop the approach that everybody benefits by helping out. You've got to make it worthwhile. You've got to make sure that everybody understands that they're going to be the one out there that's going to need help in a moment, so that everybody is engaged. If everybody's not buying in, this whole process isn't going to work. And a way to make that more successful is we suggest assigning somebody as to a sort of quarterback role. This is the person who fields all of these requests. Because if you send the request out to 6 or 7 people, nobody has responsibility or ownership of it. All of them will think, oh, Dave will get it, Jim will get it. I don't have time right now. There is no ownership to make sure that the answer gets back to the person who's out there with the customer right now. And in that case, they're not going to get an answer. And you've just lost number one and the whole thing falls apart. So pick somebody who is generally always going to be available, who's got other responsibilities that can stop at any given moment to be able to answer that question, make sure that the salesperson's question is answered. Then they can go reach out and find all the people who actually have the answers. Note, the important thing is the quarterback is not the person who has all the answers. They're just the person who can take the time to go reach all the other people who do have the answers and then filter the answer back to the salesperson out in the field. They're just coordinating things, but they're handing the ball off to all sorts of other people because they don't have all the answers. The last thing to do is to train your sales team on how to quickly ask questions. Because if they can pull up the app, type in their question quickly, get it out and go back, then they're going to stay engaged with the customer as possible. Actually train on this and spend a little time getting them used to the idea of, oh, I quickly need to put a question in here. I need to understand this. We found that if you follow these 4 steps, now you can really empower your sales team to be able to answer just about any question the customer asks. They become superheroes, basically. And this really, really changes the game. The customer is not nose down in their smartphone. They're engaged with their salespeople. They're impressed with their salespeople, and they feel like, well, this is an organization I want to do business with because they seem to have all the answers. So developing reachback is one of the absolute keys to dealing with the smartphone revolution. But the next one we talk about is choosing a review expert. Really, this is an extension of reachback because this is one of the people that your quarterback will need to reach out to be able to answer key problems. What are we talking about here? Well, we all know that nowadays there are review sites for everything, and I'm sure you're all familiar with DealerRater. I'm sure you've seen other sites such as Yelp and other places where people are presenting their opinion about the quality of service they get, what people do well, what people don't. And the reality is the best dealership in the world has bad reviews. These reviews here happen to come from a dealership that's rated 4.9 out of 5 and is the best dealership in their state. They've got awards for it, but they still have negative reviews. And it's really easy to find because, you know, on DealerRater, there's just that show me all the negative reviews button, and you can find them real fast. And here's the problem. Just one of those negative reviews can result in losing up to 22% of the prospects, just that one review. And if you have more than 1, 2, 3, 4, the percentages go up. And the real problem that we're going to talk about here today comes when it's the customer on site who's starting to look at that smartphone. They find that bad review, they've got an unhappy, and they're like, well, what the heck? Do I want to be doing business with these guys? This sounds terrible. One bad review, as we all know, is worth a lot more than 20 positive reviews. So how in the world does your sales team deal with this when they get blindsided with the, oh my gosh, what happened here? This is where the review expert comes in. They need to be able to reach back to somebody who can provide answers and explanations, somebody who knows what's going on with almost every review we've gotten. And in fact, you probably have people who are already doing this on the internet sales team, who are responding to every single review and providing a response within the rating system. So those people are great. And even if they don't have all the information, they can't remember every single negative review. Hopefully it's only a handful. They also have the ability to go look it up real quick, find the review, find our response, be able to explain it back and give a simple answer to the salesperson. There's no way your salesperson out in the field could possibly have the time to be able to do all of that. They'll completely lose the person that they're talking to. They're going to spend 10 minutes over the side looking through websites. Not going to happen. But if you have a review expert who already knows where all the sites are, they're the person who's already responding to many of these, they can provide that information quickly and effectively. And so you lose the blindside effect where all of a sudden someone's bringing up something. So here's how to deal with choosing a review expert. Make sure there's a person assigned to know all the reviews. Like I said, there's a very good chance you already have someone in your organization who's doing this. If it's not your internet sales director or somebody working for them, you really should have a person whose job it is to find every negative review and at least provide your side of the story to it. So that person's tailor-made for this role. It's just they need to get involved and everybody needs to know. That review expert must have our side of the story for every single negative review out there. You've got to know what's going on or be able to look it up quickly. And your reach-back quarterback, who we just talked about a moment ago, needs to know who this review expert is. They need to know who the person is to go to when they get those questions. Because remember, it's not the salesperson's job to go reach out to this necessarily. The real goal here should be they always reach out to the quarterback, and the quarterback pushes the question out to somebody else. Great. So we've got reach-back in place. We've got the experts going. The next thing we need to do is try and eliminate those downtimes that we talked about, the places where people are waiting around, they start pulling out the smartphone, they see the competitor's offer, they start thinking, well, maybe I should go there. Really terrible number to know about from that same Place Incorporated study that I was just talking about a minute ago is that 72% of smartphone shoppers end up going to another dealership based on the information that they found. So we all know that nowadays people only go to 1 or 2 dealerships, right? It's very few. There's no longer the days of shopping 5 or 10 dealerships. The actual number that's most commonly cited out there is about 1.9. Now, I don't know what 0.9 of a dealership is, but they're hardly going to any dealerships at all. So if they leave yours and go to somebody else's, it's very likely they're going to close the deal at the other location. But the numbers really say that it's very likely that's going to happen to you. So you want to eliminate any chance that they have of seeing that information. And one of those ways is to make sure your sales process is as perfected as possible. Now, I'm not going to tell you all the brilliant ways you can make a better sales process. You guys have years of experience and probably know that even better than I do in the auto industry. But I am going to tell you ways you can tighten up some of the chinks. Here's a sample sales process. Different dealerships have different specific steps, but this is the process when somebody comes, they have an appointment, they show up, or it's a walk-in. You know, you have a greeting, you have a walk around where you let them see different cars, take them on a test drive. Hopefully at that point you've got them ready to close. You can bring in the sales manager to meet them, then you hand them off to F&I to do the paperwork. Really simple. We're seeing lots more complicated flows out there, but let's just keep it at this level for right now. The problem comes in places like between the walk around the test drive, between the test drive and meeting with the sales manager, hand off to F&I, delays. Oh, wait, we've got to wait for the sales manager. I've got to go find him. Worse, you have to leave the person. I've got to go wait for him because he's not done. I need to go find who I'm going to be talking to on the F&I team. Those kind of things are not good. Any delays in those kind of transactions means the person's got the chance to get distracted, to look at those special offers and deals from other competitors, to decide, well, maybe I don't want to do this right now. And that's exactly what you don't want. So once again, our ability to silent message comes in here, because now you can quickly contact the sales manager and say, hey, look, we're ready to meet to close in 5 minutes. Can you meet me by the left door? And that way you can make sure they're coming to you and they can confirm. Or if they tell you, hey, look, I'm not ready, give me 10 minutes, you can find a way to vamp for a little bit and extend the time out so that person isn't just sitting around waiting, because you know the sales manager will show up at any minute. Increasing that communication eliminates the delays. It closes up the gaps in your sales process and allows you to better coordinate the transition. So it's a seamless handoff, one person to the other. It's not, okay, let's wait 5 minutes, let's wait 10 minutes, because that can be a huge problem. So in perfecting our sales process, we're trying to minimize delays between transitions. We're trying to coordinate the next meeting silently. And we're trying to keep the prospect engaged throughout this whole process. By having that silent communication means, by having that ability to have a system to talk one person to the other without becoming unengaged with the prospect, you're going to make the whole process much more seamless. So next thing we need to do is try and eliminate interruptions. Because those interruptions, those places where the conversation stops, where something distracts, that's going to be where someone's going to pull out their smartphone once again. So unfortunately, there's a lot of interruptions out there. Really common one, overhead paging, people calling to, hey, pick up on 101. But it also can be as simple as notifications, emails, messages. All those kind of things can interrupt. And those interruptions give the prospect the chance to pull out their smartphone, to leave the salesperson behind for a moment, to get off the engagement track. And now all of a sudden you've got that problem. So we need to stop these kind of things from happening. So really clearly the way to do that is first, just eliminate overhead paging. If you still have overhead paging going on, you need to consider different ways to do business. Being able to silently message, do direct transfers of calls. These are much better ways than maintaining an overhead page system. Nowadays, you can have people with mobile extensions in their pocket throughout the entire show floor on out onto the lot where they can get a call anywhere. They can also receive a message. You don't need to have that overhead paging going on, and it literally interrupts every single sales transaction when you send it out. So you've got to get rid of it, and there's tools to do that. You can also use presence technology to let everyone know you were with a customer so that it can minimize the chance that they're going to try and interrupt you. Very simple concept. Presence technology allows you to say, hey, look, I'm with a customer. You set a status, and then everybody has the ability to see who's with a customer right now and know, I don't need to call this guy. I don't need to page him. Hopefully you're eliminating the paging system. Leave him alone because he's with a customer right now. By doing this, you can drastically reduce the number of interruptions you've got going on. Now, the last thing is a bit of a psychological trick. If you ostentatiously pull your phone out of your pocket and set yourself and mention the fact you're setting yourself to eliminate all distractions, hey, look, I'm putting myself on quiet because I really want to focus on this discussion here. There's a decent chance, not a great one, it's about 20%, that the person that you're with will follow and do the same thing. There's a concept called mimicking in psychology where somebody sees someone do an action that they'll go ahead and do it themselves. So by pulling out and making it obvious that you're silencing your phone from all distractions, you may see them do the same thing. Because you can't just tell the customer, hey, you got to silence your phone. It's not going to work. But there are ways to use psychology to impact that. And so by eliminating overhead paging, by using technology presence, the silent messaging, etc., and by trying the silence your phone trick, you can try and reduce the number of interruptions and distractions to the sales process. This leaves us with one other major distraction, and that distraction is your competitors. So we're probably all familiar here with the idea of defensive ad buying. We've seen people going in and looking at search engine optimization and things like Google AdWords and going up and trying to buy up competitors' ad terminology, names of dealerships, locations, brands, etc., so that they can put their competing ads in the same slot. That's old school. But the problem nowadays is we've got what's called geofencing going on. And geofencing has been around for a little while now, where competitors can target your locations with competing ads. They can say, hey, anybody in this physical location, here are the ads that I want them to see. And now all of a sudden, they're literally invading your space, telling you, hey, you can look for a new Honda, we've got a 20% off sale. And now they're encouraging them not to go ahead and close the deal at your location, but to move on to the next location and buy. That's what you want to avoid. Now, there's a bunch of technology here, but let me make sure you at least have the basics of what's happening if you're not familiar with this already. So first there's geofencing, which is basically ads being served to a phone based on GPS data. As soon as I walk into an area, all the ads that I see can be switched over to be something specific to that geolocation. I'll give you a real simple example. A couple of companies use that very well at the National Auto Dealer Association show in Las Vegas earlier this year. If you were there, you may have noticed the same thing. That all of a sudden, every single one of your ads in whatever article or whatever website you went to on your mobile device changed to ads for people who were showing at the show. They're telling you your booth number, that you can win a prize if you come by. That's geofencing in action right there. The other technology is beaconing, which is a physical device that reaches out using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi technology to send notifications to your phone. As soon as you walk into range of one of these, you'll immediately get those notifications coming to you, and they can pop up on your screen. Now, geofencing can also be used to pop up directly a notification on your screen. There's just a more subtle technique that has to happen. Basically, somebody has to agree to an earlier transaction. Say you send out a free discount coupon. It could be something nothing related to your business, or it might be a advertising service that's doing this in general. They send out the coupons. They send out buy one get one free, or get this free CD if you send this off. And by getting that permission for that interaction, they all of a sudden have the ability to push information to the phone. This can be done through an app. This can be done through text messaging, through a couple different methodologies. But that gives them permission to the communication discussion. And now they can actively push messages to you when you enter that area without the beacon. So the beacon is a physical device. That's less likely to be on your premise, but geofencing is very, very real. And it means that even though you've done everything else we've talked about here, you're focused and engaged, you've eliminated distractions, you're keeping things as on tight as possible, your competitors can actually be pushing out ads at your physical location. So you've got to protect your backyard. And what does that mean? That means you've got to go in and consider buying defensive ads for your locations, ads that are going to be advocating your product so that you're going to be able to block out the other guy. Basic defense, right? You may have to consider investing in beacons. I'm not saying that anybody would ever be unscrupulous, but beacons are low-powered, with long-life batteries. They're small and innocuous. It's not beyond the possibility to stick a beacon in somebody else's location and all of a sudden be able to have beacon messages being thrown out to smartphones or prospects on site. So you may want to consider investing in beacons just as a defensive technology. They can also be used proactively for some positive ways. That's a little beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. And all of this will keep your prospects from being distracted by competitors, from being one of those 25% of the people who are actually actively surfing a competitor site and looking for competitive bargains while they're on your lot. The worst case scenario you could possibly have. So all of this is great, but none of it means anything if you don't follow the last step, which is measuring your effectiveness. You can't achieve success if you don't measure it, if you don't have some way to know, yes, I got there, no, I didn't. But there are some important do's and don'ts when talking about measuring success. First, you should try and identify metrics you already capture. What's the information you already have? You've got a system that provides instant messaging. Make sure that it's an enterprise class system that's going ahead and telling you how many messages, what messages are going back and forth, so you can measure those. Second, before you start jumping out and said, hey, Kevin's webinar was great, this is awesome, I want to implement all these kind of stuff, measure a baseline. Spend a little time not making these changes and being aware of what's going on so you can capture what it looks like before you start making the changes. Too many times I've seen in lots of different technology decisions, people implementing into a new technology, and 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later, I go in and talk to them and say, well, how does this compare to what you used to do? And all of a sudden you see this blank look on people's faces because they never thought to try and measure before they implemented the technology change. So definitely make that choice. And then finally, define success clearly. Look at what metrics you're going to capture, look at what you're going to measure, and say, this is what I consider success. Because if you don't do that, how are you going to know that what you've done has had any value whatsoever? So a couple don'ts. First, don't choose metrics just based on measurability. Well, you do want to choose things that you don't have to set up whole new systems to measure. Don't say, oh, I'm going to base success on that because I've got a report for it. Too many times I see people do this where they just say, hey, look, this is what I can measure, so that's what I'm going to consider success. That's sort of like the old joke of the drunk who's over on 3rd Street looking for his keys because the light's better over there, even though he lost keys over on 1st Street. Never going to find the keys that way. So just because you have things to measure, that doesn't necessarily mean they actually mean success. Second, let's avoid additional customer surveys. I think we can all agree that our customers are surveyed out. We've got enough things going on that are being sent there. We've got enough different ways we're trying to get feedback from them. By adding one more line item or adding one more additional survey, we're probably just going to frustrate them. And third, let's not ask our staff to fill out more forms or fill out more responses. That's what's going to end up in frustration. Sort of like the customer, we all know we're reporting on so many things at this point that adding one more item is probably not worth the effort. So what can we do? Well, let me give you some very specific things in relation to what we've just talked about that you can measure. First, you can measure the help requests from salespeople. Once you set up a reachback process, you can actually use that enterprise instant messaging system to say, how many of these are actually going through? How many times are people actually asking for help? That will tell you if you achieved the whole reachback philosophy or not. You can see that nobody's asking for help. You know that the sales team has not bought in. They don't trust they're going to get answers. The whole process isn't working. So it's a really simple thing to measure, and the technology should be there for you. Next, ask your quarterback to provide feedback on help for others. How many requests are they getting? And how much feedback are they getting from the other people who they're asking for help? You know, they're the ones who are going to actually reach out to the individuals. Is everybody being supportive? Are they jumping in? Ask them, is their job easier or getting hard in this new role you've assigned? Yes, that's asking one more thing for them to report on, but it's only asking one person. It's not asking everybody. You can also ask the sales manager, F&I, about handoffs and how they're going. Are they smoother? Are there less gaps? Are there less delays? Are things happening more simply? So just check out on that one. It will very easily tell you if you're succeeding at closing those gaps. And then next, you've got your review expert. You should be looking at, are you starting to see changes in the commentary? Are people commenting on the whole process? They may not specifically be commenting or even aware they're going through the process that we've talked about here today. But you will definitely see holistic benefits of, hey, these guys know their stuff, they know answers, they really knew everything when I tried to go through the sales process, I had a great time, fewer distractions, didn't hear a bunch of interruptions, those kind of things you might hear. You probably are not going to hear them say, yes, they went through a great six-step process. But you can look for the outcome and signs. And then finally, of course, the sales impact. Hopefully you have gone through what you do, which is to measure a baseline ahead of time so you know what you're looking at, and then you can come back and say, is there a difference since we put in this process? Because when it comes down to it, this is all about trying to improve sales over the long term, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to make sure we're improving things. So looking at your sales impact is a long-term measurement. But what I would suggest you not do is implement this and 60 days later say, okay, where's the big kick in sales that Kevin promised me? You've got to give it some time. You absolutely have to provide a longer ramp to be able to see those differences and see those changes. So really, to measure effectiveness, we've seen you have to measure to succeed in the first place. You've got to take effort. This is not something that you can just go, okay, hey, look, I'm measuring. This is going to take some time, but you want to try and keep that effort off your customers and even off your staff as much as possible, because that's just going to frustrate the both of them. In the end, we've all heard it many a time, you only manage what you measure. So you have to choose very carefully what you're measuring, and you have to realize whatever it is you're measuring, that's exactly what you're managing at that point, because that's the reports, that's the data, that's what you're looking at. It's the information that's giving you the results. So in summary, we saw the way that shoppers get sucked in their smartphone. It's when the salesperson leaves them alone. And now we know the salesperson should never leave them alone. We keep them engaged with reach back. We never walk away from them to get the answers. Even though number 2 tells us we have to have all the information they're looking for, we use the reach back methodology to make sure we have it all. We make sure we have experts like the review expert in place, all controlled by a quarterback who's trying to make sure the whole process works. And we also make sure that there are no delays, there are no interruptions, so that those people aren't having a chance to jump back on their smartphone. They're not waiting for someone, because we've made the transition process and our sales process seamless by handing off one to another using silent messaging. And we're making sure they don't get notifications by trying to encourage them to silence their phone, by getting rid of other notifications within the operation and making sure the salesperson certainly isn't getting anything. We're doing all those things to eliminate those interruptions. And we're making sure to protect our backyard so that the notification they get isn't our competitor literally handing out and saying, hey, I've got a deal for you, because that's certainly not what we want at all. And when we do all those things, we're going to minimize the time they're spending on their smartphone, which once again is going to minimize that statistic that I told you earlier, that 72% of the people who are shopping on their smartphone are going to end up heading to the next dealership rather than buying with you. We're going to minimize that. We're going to make you more successful, and hopefully it's going to end up in a much more in a much better place with more sales for your dealership. So I hope that's been helpful. I want to see if we get a chance to get some questions. Ask me about what I just talked about. Feel free to challenge me on anything. I always love it when people challenge me to prove I'm right. Let's hear a discussion here.
All right. We've got a first question here, Kevin, is if you silence your phone, how will you know when the quarterback sends answers to your questions?
That's a great, great question. A wonderful question. The answer to that is there's actually the ability within your phone, both on iOS and on Android, to only silence certain applications. So you can choose when you're getting notifications or not. So it does take a little bit of technical know-how, and that's something that you can spend some time on that training, when I talked about before, where you train your team on sending messages, to be able to silence email, silence all the other things, your Facebook, LinkedIn, what are the other kind of notifications, if it's your sports system from ESPN, make sure those are all silenced, but you can still make sure your messaging system is a system that can still send notifications and they can come through.
Okay. Let's see. This one says, very surprised these metrics show low review of dealer reviews. Sounds significantly low relative to numerous other metrics associated with the prior. Is this metrics only associated with dealer reviews at cars.com?
This is only associated with people reading dealer reviews literally on site. So this metric is all about that person is standing on your dealership right now on your lot. That's what all those statistics that I showed you just a minute ago were about. They're just, I'm standing on your lot right now, and I'm looking at a review of your dealership at that time. It's not covering at all how many people are looking at ratings, because beforehand, afterwards, there's a much higher percentage of people looking at ratings. There's no doubt about that. But this is just people are standing literally on your lot and looking at it on their smartphone while they're there. I will also point out that this information is getting to be a little bit long in the tooth. It's from 2014, so I'm certain that the number is higher nowadays. I haven't found any new studies that people have done on the same subject. So.
All right. Can you share some compensation plans for quarterbacks?
You know, that's a really good question. Let me get back to you on that because I can certainly follow up with the group on that information. There's some things that have been done with some of the people we've worked with on that, but I don't actually know those numbers. I don't know what people have done there, so I don't have good information for you on that one right now.
Okay, I mean, but it is variable though, right? It would be a variable income based upon the success of the team. Is that kind of the thought process there?
Yeah. And I don't see, just to be clear, this isn't a dedicated role where you're saying, hey, look, to do this, you've got to put in a quarterback who's permanently doing quarterback duties. This is somebody who just has a role where they can be interruptible. They're not somebody who's doing stuff where they have to be focused all the time. That's not necessarily a customer-facing purpose, like somebody in the BDC or something like that. But somebody within the organization who can be interruptible and say, okay, I can hold off on doing this paperwork right now. Let me do this and take care of them. But the quarterback role is not meant to be hey, you go hire somebody as a quarterback 100% of the time. Only in very large organizations would I think they could possibly have usability for that.
I got you. So this is my question, but now that you said that, so maybe at certain points in the day when you weren't busy, it could be maybe it was a rolling role where maybe the finance manager, when he didn't have anything to do, would do it, and if he got busy, he might pass it to. You might have 5 or 6 people within your organization that, before one person gave up the role, they found somebody else to give it to. Is that kind of how it works?
Absolutely. And there's technology you can use to do that. One of the customers we've seen that pioneers for this concept is they basically had a queue that they put in using technology, or communications technology that we provided them, so that they could be able to have people signed in or signed out essentially in that quarterback role. So you already knew who the quarterback was because they were signed in on the system saying, I'm in this role.
I gotcha. Here's another one. What percentage of dealers would you say are using this quarterback system, and how long has it been around?
So this is something that we've worked with customers of ours, and it's not something that's widely spread at this point. That's part of the reason I wanted to do this, because we've seen some real success, but we've only seen it with a very few percentage of our customers to this point. So it's not like you're going to be able to talk about, oh yeah, hey, 30% of the industry is doing this kind of thing. This is a relatively new technique.
Okay. Well, it looks like that is all the questions that we have. If anybody has any other questions, please raise your hand and start. You can raise your hand as an attendee or type it in real quick, and we will get it answered for you. Again, this is Brian Ankney with Auto Success Magazine. Kevin, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Sure.
Cool. And everyone who's on the call, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I hope that you learned some things today that will help you improve your business. Please feel free. If you have some questions afterwards, if you'd like, you can email them to me. You can contact Kevin. We're both here to help you. If there's any further information you'd like, please email us. We'll do our best to get it for you. And as I said in the beginning, if you haven't joined Auto Success webinars yet on Facebook, please do. Kevin, would it be all right if once you get the information on the pay plans for the quarterbacks that I post it there so people can find it?
Sure, that's no problem at all.
Perfect. So, yeah, he'll find that information, and I'll send everybody on this call an email letting you know when it's up there as soon as he's able to collect that. I appreciate everybody coming. Please join us for future webinars, and I hope you have a great day. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to share?
The only thing I'd point out is if you want to learn more about what Vertical's doing with communication solutions and such, you can always go to vertical.com/auto, and we have a very specific line of communication solutions for the auto dealer industry, which is what I spend all my time on. So we can help you out with a lot of different areas in that. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks everybody. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.